Hello there. Welcome to our next video. This is about improving your sleep. My name is Leo Bell, and I am the Wellbeing Lead here at Sun Uplift. So let's get right to it. Usually, this workshop is delivered in online as in a group setting. So things like confidentiality would apply in those settings, but they don't in this case. But what I will say is have a pen and paper handy. And remember, you can pause this video, you can rewind it and go back, make notes. Not everything in this is going to be relevant to you, but even little bits will be relevant. So make notes, take your time. You don't have to watch this all in one go. This video will also be available in bite-sized chunks sort of split by topic, and this video is also will be split into two. This workshop is usually about an hour and a half, but since there are no participants, it's just me yapping away. It probably won't take the full hour and a half, but we will see how we get on. Okay. Yep, none of the other stuff that I have in my notes here is relevant. So let's get going. So let's get started on sleep. So introduce ourselves as how we. So in these situations, I'm just going to sort of share my own sort of. I'm going to basically play the part of the group person. So we go round and we ask everybody to introduce themselves and describe whether they consider themselves to be an early bird or a night owl. So an early bird being someone that goes to bed early and wakes up early, or a night owl goes to bed late and wakes up late. This is obviously, if you're watching this, then you might be thinking, I go to bed late and I wake up early because I can't sleep. But it's what you would naturally sort of gravitate towards. I'm kind of aiming at here. So in my case, introduce myself as I'd like to be addressed. You could call me Leo. And I would describe myself as a night owl. I'm definitely someone who prefers um, staying up a little bit later, depending. Like I'll do my business, and it gets to about 9 o'clock, and I'm like, I would like some me time now. So I do. There is that part of me that prefers the nighttime. And is sharing issues about getting to sleep for me, it would probably be my mind can get a bit busy at night, so I can have too many thoughts sort of kicking off at once. So in this workshop, we're going to focus on three main areas that are usually the main problem areas when it comes to our sleep. And these three areas are behavior, thoughts, and feelings. Now, I'm sure some of you watching would have heard of CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. And while we apply the ideas taken from CBT, we would say that by changing one of these three elements, we can alter our problems. So we will work through these areas today. We're going to break them down bit by bit, and we're going to analyze how we can have work on it, really, because a lot of this is going to take work. It's not, you're not going to watch this video and you're going to go, boom, I'm sleeping 12 hours the next night. I mean, don't want to sleep 12 hours, but let's say you sleep 9 hours the next night. That's probably not going to happen. If it does, that's great, but that probably won't. This is going to take work, and a lot of the things we're going to talk about are practices. So it is worth, and so I'm going to read the notes here, but please keep in mind that material today that we'll be going through has been designed so that there is something for everyone. So focus on what's valuable to you, which will likely be different for each individual. Because and the reason for this is not only the fact that different tools work for different people, but it's also linked to the fact that different reasons, the reason that people have issues with sleep, there can be different reasons. Like there's different areas of your sleep that you might be struggling with. Many of us experience sleep difficulty at some point in our lives. I myself have had issues when I was back when I was a carer. I remember being under that level of stress and being in hospital settings and stuff. My sleep was very much disrupted. Sleep difficulties usually include difficulties falling asleep and difficulties staying asleep. If you are having difficulty sleeping, you may notice that you also wake during the night or early in the morning and find it hard to get back to sleep. Some of the most common causes of sleep disruption are, first one's a big one, stress or worry. Next, we got changes in sleeping patterns. So for example, jet lag and shift work. We can link this to our circadian rhythm, which is something I'm going to talk about in a little bit. Environmental factors such as noisy, bright or uncomfortable bedrooms. So we're going to talk about how to make the environment that you sleep in as advantageous as you can be towards sleep. Also, we've got written here difficult life events such as bereavement, divorce, or redundancy. This ties slightly into the stress and worry, but there's also the level of emotional weight that those carry. Having children is known to disrupt sleep. Anyone I've worked with, new fathers and new mothers, and this is a very common one, especially when the child is especially young in the first few years. Also, we've got physical ill health or pain. We've got going into hospital, residential home or hotel. So this is a really common one. If you sleep in a room that you are not accustomed to, then less of your brain is able to switch off initially, which is why you can feel a bit groggy after staying in a hotel, or any of the ones I've mentioned there. There's unwanted side effects of medication. That's quite a common one. Street drugs such as amphetamines, ecstasy, or cocaine. Legal drugs such as alcohol, caffeine, or tobacco also fall into this. Number of these are stimulants, so they basically make it harder for your brain to switch off when you want it to at night. Withdrawal from medicines and drugs is a common one, and emotional difficulties such as anxiety and depression. For most people, sleep difficulties are temporary and will pass with time. However, sleep disruption can last longer for some people and can start to affect areas of life, including work, physical health, and relationships. When we're experiencing sleep difficulties, we often may not be aware of how much sleep we actually had or think we need more sleep than we really do. We may find ourselves worrying about our sleep difficulties, and this in turn can make the difficulties worse. The horrible thing about sleep is that it's not something that you can force yourself into. So if you worry about it, then it's not like a run or something where ultimately you get up and get going. It's something that it's kind of you have to let go to a certain extent, and that worrying makes it harder to let go in some respects. So you can see it can kind of snowball. Um, there was something else I was going to mention here about oh yes, I will talk about that in a sec. I'm just going to finish this bit. So it says the amount of sleep we need to function properly varies from person to person. Some people may need 9 hours of light, whilst others might only need 4 hours. I'd probably say some people may need 9 hours of light, and some others may need 4.5 hours, because I'm going to mention this a little bit later. I like to think about sleep as being in 90-minute chunks, and I'll explain why briefly in a minute. The amount of sleep we need also changes with our age and lifestyle changes, such as our activity levels. If your activity levels go up, let's say you're training, you're doing a lot of physical exercise or something, you're probably going to need more sleep. And also, this is also the case if you are mentally very much taxing yourself. So the extra thing that I was going to mention here is just to talk about how sleep disruption can impact on your general life kind of thing. If you've watched any of these other videos, you might have heard me talk about the concept of the backpack. So in the backpack that we carry, invisible backpack that we carry around, we put all of our stresses and all of our emotions in this backpack. So stresses being personal, professional, relationship, whatever. And then emotions being things like sadness, worry, shame, guilt, anger. All of these things can go in our backpack and they can weigh us down. Now imagine that have this backpack going around and you're feeling tired because you haven't had a good night's sleep. I mean, try to do exercise after having no sleep and you're going to find it's more difficult than if you've had a good night's kip. So it is something to bear in mind. The backpack, the life backpack, is going to feel heavier if we're not able to tackle sleep. And so it is important that we do what we can in order to maximize the opportunities for us to have good quality sleep. So first things first, we're going to think about our behavior, specifically the different factors and habits that can affect our sleep. When you have had sleep problems for a long time, you can develop common bad habits that can actually cause you to continue having sleep problems or even make them worse. So let's start off with a question. So I'll give you 5 seconds. You can also pause the video, and then I'll have a go as well. So the question is, what bad sleep-related habits do you think you might currently have, if any? Okay, so I'm sure you've had a think. So examples. So one example, I'm going to list off what I have in my notes here. So we've got a lack of routine. So let's think about a baby. When people have newborns, they very often will have a nighttime routine. And as we get older, we forget about this. We forget to do these routines for ourselves. But having a routine, so for example, a really simple one could be something like when it hits 9 o'clock, you turn off the TV, you turn off all the main lights, and you just have a lamp on, and maybe you go make yourself a cup of hot chocolate, a cup of tea, but one with no caffeine, or maybe even a cup of, I have a cup of hot water before I go to bed, and then I bring a book and I read my book for an hour or so, and then I head off to sleep. And that's my routine. Lights go off, I make myself the hot drink, I get my book, I read, and then an hour later or so, or when I start to feel a bit snoozy, I then switch off and I set up all my things to get ready for bed. We also got here negative associations with the bed and the bedroom. This is kind of what I was saying earlier. If you're going to worry about sleep, it's not something that we do, it's something that happens to us. So the more that we worry about sleep and the bed and the bedroom, the more that we have these negative emotions associated with it, the more difficult we're going to find it to get to sleep. Spending too much time in bed, and this is especially important if we think about that time could be spent sleeping or lying awake not asleep. So the kind of thinking behind this is that you want to associate your bed with sleeping. You do not want to associate your bed with being awake. So I'm just going to say right off the bat, really simple thing that you can do to improve your quality of sleep. Don't have your phone in the room. Get yourself a cheap alarm clock from Amazon. I'm sure you can find one for £5. Set it up. That could be part of your routine before you go to bed. It could be leaving your phone on, putting your phone on charge in the other room, or putting your phone in a drawer in the other room and heading off to bed, heading off to the bedroom. The bedroom is for sleep. Okay, that's what we want to associate it with. Not being awake, not scrolling on Facebook, none of these things. Maybe reading a book, but even then, reading a book, if you are going to read a book in bed, I'd make sure that you have a really, really dim light. But I personally would suggest not doing that. I would suggest reading a book in another room and then just going to bed the moment when you start to feel really snoozy. Also, we have here written irregular sleep schedule / pattern. So you might have gotten yourself into a bad sleeping pattern. For example, say only being able to sleep at 3 a.m., meaning you miss half the morning sleeping. So this, again, I'm talking about routine. Our bodies are routines. Our bodies follow what's called a circadian clock. So our bodies have a 24-hour clock. So let me put it like this. If you were to live in a cave in which there was no sunlight and you had no idea what time of the day it was, your body would still follow reasonably closely a 24-hour pattern of being awake and then being asleep. If you've ever had jet lag is your body circadian rhythm being out of whack. So it's really important to try and get this pattern. And one of the ways that you can do this is by having a regular bedtime and regular morning time. So Dr. Matthew Walker, who wrote the book Why We Sleep, really, really, really good expert in sleep, in the field of sleep, probably the most prominent expert in the world of sleep. He suggests that you have the same alarm in the morning every day. Doesn't matter if it's weekends, doesn't matter if it's weekdays, and that you go to bed at the same time every day. It's keeping that circadian rhythm in check. Obviously, we can't all do that, but we've got to do our best. So get as close as possible to it. Another one, daytime napping. Now, I like naps, and I'll explain in a second what I mean, but I'll finish this point. You might have gotten yourself into a routine that your body thinks it needs to nap in the middle of the day, then you can't get to sleep at night. So what I would say is that if you are really having trouble getting to sleep at night, do not nap in the day. You want to be as tired as possible when you go to bed. You want that period of sleep. I'm a big fan of non-sleep deep rest, so that can be meditating, that could be nidra yoga, that could be lying down in a dark room for a bit with eye mask and earplugs and just chilling for half an hour. It doesn't necessarily mean, and you could do this in a different room to the bedroom, for example, if you don't want to associate that being awake with your bedroom. I'm a big fan of this, especially if you do it at the right time, so between, say, 12 and 3 o'clock. I wouldn't ever do it later than 3. Just 20 minutes is quite good for that. If you are really struggling, it can give your energy levels a little boost. But if you are struggling getting to sleep at night, I would not suggest doing that. I would suggest focusing on getting that part of your routine down. And finally, here I've got bad sleep related habits like eating too close to bedtime. So especially if you're having things with sugar, you can get away with eating close to bedtime if it's not going to have a big glucose spike afterwards. So make sure that you have lots of fiber before you have any meals. Try not to have sugar too close to bed. So this can be, I mean, I'm including any sort of caffeine before bed would be is a terrible idea as well. So no chocolates, no cans of Coca-Cola or anything like that, or Diet Coke for that matter. No mango. Try to avoid too much fruit late at night. Many of these things that are high in sucrose, fructose, glucose are not a great idea to have too close to bedtime. Too much caffeine later on. I have just mentioned not to have caffeinated drinks, but it's worth noting that caffeine has a half-life of 6 hours. So if you have a coffee at 3 o'clock at night and it has 200 milligrams of caffeine in it, that means at 9 o'clock that night, you will still have 100 milligrams of caffeine in your bloodstream. So you still have half a coffee in you. So that is worth bearing in mind, especially if you're having more than one coffee in the day. It can add up, it can be cumulative, and that can impact on your sleep. Drinking alcohol to help us get to sleep, terrible idea, because what that's going to do is that's going to impact on the quality of your sleep. And so I have a saying, and this is the same with sleeping tablets. I have the same saying, is that sedation is not sleep. Just because you're knocking yourself out and you are getting in bed and you are not being conscious for a certain amount of time does not mean that you are getting good quality rest. Okay, it's much better to have a good routine than to be relying on drugs and relying on alcohol and things of that nature in order to get sleep. The other issue of alcohol is that it impacts on what's called REM sleep. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about the different stages of sleep in a minute. But REM sleep is rapid eye movement sleep, which is where the period of sleep where you dream, and your body needs this. It's how you emotionally process the day. It's how you emotionally process your past. And if you impact on this too much, then it's really bad. If you've ever drunk alcohol, then you might have noticed that as the more like just before you wake up, you get very vivid dreams. You get really intense, vivid dreams. And the reason why that is because whilst your body's processing the alcohol, your brain cannot get the REM sleep it wants. So it builds up what's called a REM sleep debt. So then the last hour or so, or 2 hours or so in which you are asleep, your brain now it's processed enough alcohol in your body and it can now access this REM sleep. It gets all of it at once. So it's like it's desperate. It just munches on all the REM sleep it can get. So it's important to note that, because obviously it's important because our brain is keeping tabs on how much it's having and then binging on it when it gets the chance. We've also, last thing I've got here is technology in bed. As I mentioned, we want our bed to be associated with sleeping. The other bad side of technology is lights. We don't want to get light in our eyes at nighttime because light tells us that it's daytime and daytime is not for sleep. So, how might the following factors impact your sleep? Um, okay, so some of these, so let's have a look. Let's have a look at some of how these factors will affect our sleep. So nicotine. Nicotine is a stimulant, so it has a similar effect as caffeine, as I mentioned earlier. It is good to avoid it at least 3 hours before bed. You might think that it is relaxing you, but it is actually waking you up. The thing is that you're not relaxed. It doesn't relax you when you have a cigarette. The only reason that you feel relaxed when you have a cigarette is because now you've craved. You've now sort of hit that craving. The cigarette causes the craving. It doesn't cause the relaxation. It's causing the stress in the first place. Caffeine is another one, so avoid at least 3 to 4 hours before you go to bed. I'd probably say, I mean, I wouldn't have caffeine after midday if it was me personally, but try at least 3 to 4 hours before bed. Caffeine is a funny one because it doesn't just appear in coffee, it appears in tea leaves, it appears in cola nut, cocoa, chocolate, soft drinks, and some medication. So do keep an eye out. Diet. Remember to strike a balance. If you go to bed hungry, you'll find it difficult to fall asleep. And if you eat too close to bedtime, you could be too full to fall asleep as you'll still be digesting. Also, there is the glucose spike that I was telling you about. So again, 3 hours before sleep is best, or before bed is best. And if you are feeling hungry, a light snack is best, and one that is low in sugar, low in glucose, low in fructose. Alcohol, we've already kind of talked about this. Alcohol might help you fall asleep, but it's going to drastically impact on the quality of your sleep. It also means you might wake up in the night. Alcohol makes you want to go to the loo more, so that's going to disrupt your sleep. It's also going to make you much more thirsty because during sleep you lose quite a lot of water anyway through your breath and through sweat, and then alcohol just dehydrates your body even more, so you're going to wake up with a super dry mouth. Exercise is an interesting one. So exercise is a great way of tiring out your body and relaxing your mind for the evening. But straight after exercise, your mind is actually, it feels more alert because it's had to pump lots of adrenaline and things in your body to get it to go. So doing exercise too close to bedtime actually wakes up your body. If you exercise after work, late afternoon or early evening is best. Sometimes I exercise after work every day pretty much, well, as often as I can, and it's a nice separator for me between my professional side of life and my personal life, and it gets me out of work mode. It kind of just, all right, it's almost like a flash in your face of cold water. It's like a big old flash. Another aspect of exercise too close to sleep that's not good is exercise raises your body temperature, and what we actually want is we want your body temperature to drop. And I will talk about that in a little bit about environmental factors. In fact, I'm going to talk about it now because room temperature and air quality is next here. So extreme temperatures can affect our sleep. A hot room can keep us tossing and turning, and a cold room can make it hard to sleep around. Around 18 Celsius is the best. This will be personal to you though. I always like to sleep with the window open a little bit so that there's fresh air coming into the room. And fresh air is actually found to help us sleep better. If you don't want to sleep with a little bit of air in the room, think about having the window open during the day if you can. If your bedroom is too hot, you got to think about cooling down the room somehow, opening the window, having a fan, whatever it is, maybe even hugging a big bottle of water when you fall asleep. If it's cool, too cool, think about having an extra blanket. This is really important because, and so body temperature is here as well. What we want to do in terms of body temperature wise in order to get to sleep is we want to cool down. So your body has to drop in temperature ever so slightly in order for you to fall asleep. I don't know the ins and outs of why, but it's a proven thing in research. And this is why things like hot baths and hot drinks are shown to be so effective, because what happens is when you have a hot bath, your body naturally warms up and then it cools down once you get out of the bath. It goes, I mean, obviously, you, like think about it, you're out of the hot water. So although your body has heated up, because of that cooling process, you're able to get to sleep easier. This is also why hot drinks are quite effective. I wouldn't have too much, obviously, because you don't want to go pee in the middle of the night. Now, having a little cup of whatever it is that you choose, I have my cup of hot water. That's really helpful because that's warming you up and then you are cooling down because there's only one way to go once you've had that kind of thing. Finally, we got bed comfort. So try your best to make sure your mattress and pillows are comfortable for you. We're all different, so you might prefer soft or a firmer surface. I personally do quite like a firmer surface, but it depends. I've also got here limit noise. So I'm going to just be quite blunt. I use earplugs. I think earplugs are a great invention. If you don't find that you particularly like earplugs, experiment. Find some that work for you. Maybe you need to have headphones in. Maybe putting some headphones in with no noise, like your phone's going to be in the other room anyway, and hopefully you've turned off Bluetooth and Wi-Fi and everything, so it won't connect. Have your headphones in as earplugs if necessary. I would say earplugs though are the way to go forward. Find some earplugs that work for you because it really helps. It really helps me personally, and it's something that I mean I don't leave the house without earplugs pretty much because I like them so much because you never know. Finally, limit life, limit limit light even. So I've already mentioned the circadian rhythm. That circadian rhythm is controlled by light. So if there is one thing that I would want you to take away from this talk, it is the importance of light. The reason that I talk about this and the reason that I'm very passionate about this is because it's not a very well understood topic. And so let's break it down. When your alarm goes off in the morning, you know that it's the morning. You know it's time to wake up. You know what time of the day it is because you can look at your watch or your phone or whatever and you can be like, it's 9 o'clock, 8 o'clock, whatever it is, 7 o'clock, whatever time you wake up in the morning. Now, you know consciously that it's the morning. However, your brain has no idea what's going on. Your brain needs visual cues. We are ultimately animals to a certain degree. We have come, and this is our form after billions of years of evolution. But our body is still physically controlled by physical cues around us. So light is how our body knows what time of the day it is. So the two things that are important to take from this are when you wake up, get out and get some sunlight as soon as possible. So what I do is I go outside and I skip rope for 10 minutes. Almost as soon as I wake up, I pop on some like comfy clothes, I go outside and I skip for 10 minutes. And I face the sun. I obviously don't look directly at the sun because that'd be madness, but I look around the area, so I'll face towards the sun where the sun is rising, and I will get in that morning light. It's important that it is morning light. It does not have the same impact if it's like midday. It has to be the morning light. It doesn't have to be obviously the moment the sun is up, but it has to be, you want to be close. You want to be within a few hours. So say before you go to work or before you go to school, it's gonna be beneficial. The second point is that just like you want to get light in the morning to wake your brain up, you want to limit your light in the evening to tell your body it's time to go to bed. It is really important. I personally don't have lights on. I only have lamps. I know that sounds a little bit crazy, and in the winter it can be a bit annoying, but the moment it starts to get dark, I only turn lamps on. I might have my TV on or whatever, and I'll still go on my phone. I'll have the warm color setting so that it goes so that the blue light is limited. But at nighttime, it's nighttime. It is not daytime anymore. And by having Limiting the light exposure to your eyes, you are letting your brain know it is starting to get dark, and then your brain starts to release the necessary hormones. Just like in the morning, your brain releases hormones when it gets the cues from light to say, oh, it's time to get up. This is what we're going to do, blah, 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 blah. Your brain does the same thing when it realizes it's night. It starts to release melatonin and all these other hormones, and it's your brain's way of telling your body, all right, we're going to bed soon. We're going to start shifting the pattern from wakefulness to sleepiness. Another little thing that you can do is if you get in the sunlight as the sun is setting, so you might see sometimes it can be like pinky orangey clouds. Not every time. It's always lovely when it does that, but not it doesn't do it every time. And it is really nice. It is really nice, and it's something that if you do it, it triggers all more of the hormones in your brain telling it that you're asleep. So like bear in mind that as a species, we haven't had buildings for the majority of the time that we've existed. It's only in the past few thousand years that humans have lived in buildings and would not have been exposed to sunlight at all times, bear in mind. So that's two things that I would say. Another thing that, I mean, you can do, if you're a shift worker, for example, you can buy lights, you can buy replacement lights. They're not as effective though, so I would be cautious. But try your best to get that morning sunlight, so 10 minutes or so, especially if it's sunny. Even if it's overcast, if it's overcast like it is today over in England, then I would suggest 20 minutes. But again, even though it doesn't feel like you're getting any direct sunlight, you're getting plenty. And these are some of the things that I just talked about. Okay, right. What three things do you think constitute a strong sleep pattern? So I'll give you 5 seconds to have a little think about that. Okay, so I'm going to read out what's in my notes and let's see whether you thought of any of these things. So, a regular sleep-wake schedule. I've already mentioned this, but the fact it's right at the top here shows you how important it is. This all links back to our circadian rhythm, this thing I keep going on about, this body clock that really is important. So regular sleep schedule generally means going to sleep and then waking up on the same time most days. Now, obviously, life is fun, so we won't be going to bed the same time every night. But the more consistent you can get with this, let's say you do it 6 times out of 7 and you do that for a couple of weeks, that is going to have an impact on the quality of your sleep, and you will notice it. You won't notice it immediately, like a number of these things I keep saying. It's going to take time. You've got to keep pursuing it, but it will have an impact. Next here, I've got an unbroken nighttime sleep, not waking up multiple times in the night. So a couple of things that you can do that will help this is reducing the caffeine, not having alcohol, and not drinking too much water in the evenings and the late at night. Another thing that you can do, and this is a bit of a weird one, but it is, I have seen it in various studies now to be effective, and that is mouth tape. So if you take, you can buy on Amazon mouth tape. You can also get a surgical tape. I know that I probably sound crazy saying this, but it is something that is growing in the field of sleep. And what it does is if you pop a little bit of tape over your mouth, it can be up to down so you don't cover your whole mouth if that's something that you're worried about. It forces you to breathe through your nose when you're asleep. Nasal breathing is shown to be much more beneficial for your body than mouth breathing. Our mouths were made to chew, not to sleep, not to breathe. Our nose was made to breathe. And if you do nasal breathing through the night, which this mouth tape would force you to, it is shown to improve your quality of sleep, but also it's shown to reduce the number of times that you wake up in the night as well, especially if you wake up to go for a pee in the night and you find that you do this very often, because breathing through your mouth actually releases a hormone that can make you go to the loo. So there you go, a little bonus tip. Next, and the final thing I have on my list here is few negative effects on daytime activities. So e.g. fatigue, irritability. Of course, there will be days that you're more stressed and have more on your mind, which will affect your mood, but overall, you're able to do your day and not feel shattered. Others aren't walking around eggshells around you. So basically trying your best to reduce your stress in the day. And I would suggest that if you do have a lot on your mind and you're going to bed, write it in a journal, get it out of your head, put it on paper, and then it doesn't live in your head. I mean, I would even suggest writing it in a journal and then dumping the journal in the other room when you dump your phone in there. A few things to keep in mind when we're thinking about our behavior. Every one of us has an individual sleep pattern. There is no one size fits all here. We're not telling you must be all getting 8 hours of sleep after this workshop, however great that would be. You'll all want different things. Some need 10 hours sleep, others can be okay with much less. It's finding what's best for you. For me personally, I like 9 hours. 9 hours is my sweet spot. If I have significantly less than that, I feel quite drowsy. If I have too much more than that, I start to feel a bit lethargic and a bit ugh. So 9 hours is my sweet spot, but see what works for you. And the thing is that as you practice with these sleep patterns and as you persevere with it, you will see what seems to work with you. We want to do things that fit in well with our being, as it were. Um, I'm not going to talk about how this takes a lot of perseverance because I've already mentioned this enough time. Poor sleep can be unpredictable. This can make us feel very frustrated and anxious about our sleep and generally about being in bed, which leads us on to the next thought that we might have. If I spend more time in bed, there's more chance that I'll make up the debt of sleep that I'm owed. So you think that I'll have a lie-in on Saturday for an extra 3 hours, or I'll go to bed earlier and just be lying in bed. However, spending more time in bed normally makes the problem worse. I already talked about how we want to associate bedroom with sleep, okay? Not with lying there being on our phone or lying there being awake worrying about stuff, which is why I say write in the journal and dump it in the other room. Why I say dump your phone in the other room and buy yourself a cheap alarm clock. Because what happens is our brain is hang on one sec. So our brain is a predictive machine. It predicts things. If I go like this, if I pull my thumb and I take my two hands and I whack them together, I know a noise is going to come out. It's predictive. Our brain is a predictive machine. If I want to make noise with my hands, I know to do that. Same thing sort of happens with sleep. If our brain starts to think that that the bedroom is the place that I lie there and I never get to sleep and I really struggle and I just lie there and worry, then that's what's going to happen. Your brain is a predictive machine. So what we want to do is we want to change that association, which is why limiting your time in bed can actually be beneficial. Because we don't want to start associating the bed as the place of worry and the place where we don't sleep. So it might sound strange, but it is true. Psychologists often teach people with insomnia that what's going to help them is to lessen their time in bed to an absolute bare minimum. And they use this as a kind of training to get themselves back into a good sleep routine. Less time in bed can actually help us sleep better. And this does sound slightly ridiculous, but bear with me. Spending less time in bed is a technique known as sleep restriction. How can this help us? It's a behavioral intervention to treat sleep problems. It can be a bit challenging, but many sleep experts agree that it is one of the most effective strategies for repairing our sleep, as they feel poor sleep is maintained by spending excessive time in bed. And if you've been paying attention to this workshop so far, you can kind of guess why. Sleep restriction aims to give you greater control over your sleep. It aims to knit together the patches of sleep you may experience, in essence, to make it more efficient. The way we do this is by spending less time in bed. Sleep restriction initially creates a mild sleep deprivation, which promotes the natural onset of sleep. So, for example, you might spend 10 hours of bed a night. You might only be asleep for 5 hours though. You spend the rest of the time tossing and turning or looking at your phone. As a result of this, poor sleepers also tend to struggle with sleep variability. So you may, for example, sleep a lot on Monday, but you don't get an awful lot on Tuesday at all. This can feel quite frustrating and makes us feel like we're out of control. Routine getting messed up. Luckily, sleep restriction can help with this problem. It works by taking all of the amount we sleep and putting it together in one block. So let's stick with our example of spending 10 hours in bed. You might, for example, sleep from midnight to 2 and then from 2 to, and then from 7 until 10. So you get 5 hours sleep, but you're awake for the 5 hours in between. You only sleep for half of the time you're in bed. And that means that our sleep is not very efficient. There will be a separate video that sort of dives into this a little bit more because nobody likes maths and there's an awful lot of maths on this slide. But I am going to read what's on the slides here, and then do check out our other video that breaks this down in a little bit more detail. So, but first, anyway, to begin, we must work out what we call our sleep efficiency, rather than a rather unappealing equation that you have to learn in school. But bear with me, it's actually pretty simple to do, and you can do it from home, and it can work really well for some. One goal of sleep restriction is to increase how much sleep you get by reducing the amount of time spent in bed compared to the time spent sleeping. Sleep restriction initially creates a mild sleep deprivation, which promotes the natural onset of sleep, like I said earlier. It works by taking in all the amount of sleep and putting it into one block. So the example I gave, there was 10 hours in bed, 5 hours of sleep, the rest of the time tossing and turning. Monday you're getting good sleep, Tuesday you didn't get any. So you need to work out your sleep window, which is the actual amount of time you spend sleeping. So that in this case was 5 hours. Then you divide this by the number of hours you lie in bed for in total. So that's 10 hours, both trying to sleep and asleep. So let's say that's 10 hours. Then you divide it by 100. So 5 divided by 10 is 0.5, times that by 100 and you get 50. So 50% of the time that you're in bed, you're asleep. That's not very efficient. This is your sleep efficiency percentage, and it's something you would try to work out on either a nightly or weekly basis. So keep that in mind. We will need that in a minute. So now that you've worked that out, in this case, we've worked out that this person is 50% sleep efficiency. We now need to think about sleep restriction. The rule is to restrict the amount of time you spend in bed to the amount of sleep you get on an average night. So first you need to select what's called an anchor time. This might be the time you need to wake up or to get ready for school, work, whatever it is. The anchor time is fixed. So every day you need to get up at your anchor time. No more snoozing. The snooze button does not exist. If your anchor time is 6 a.m., you must get out of bed at 6 a.m. and this includes the weekends. I keep harping on about routine, but this is a prime example of it. Once you have your anchor time, you then need to calculate your threshold time. You do this by taking your sleep window, so brackets average day total sleep, and counting the hours from your anchor time. As above, 6 a.m. is the anchor time and your sleep window is 6.5 hours. This means your threshold time is 11:30. With the threshold time, you must not go to bed before this time on any day. Just as your anchor time is fixed, the threshold time is fixed too until your sleep gets better. Secondly, if your threshold time has passed, but you aren't feeling sleepy, don't go to bed as you won't sleep and this will set back your process. Remember, I keep saying we want to associate bed and bedroom with sleep, not with rolling around, being anxious, being awake. Now you try this out and you then, now you try this out and you then every day and try it out every day in the week. You work out your new sleep efficiency percentage and there's a rule again in the handbook. So if it's above 85%, you can increase your sleep window by 15 minutes. If it's between 80 to 85%, you must keep your sleep window the same. If it is less than 80%, you must reduce your sleep window by 15 minutes. The key thing is you only ever change your threshold time. You never change your anchor time. So some extra tips. Keep a sleep diary for a normal week, as it will give you a baseline for how much sleep you get. So record the time you went to bed, the time you got up, and the amount of sleep you actually got. Second, calculate the average number of hours of sleep you get per night. This is also called our sleep window. So in our example, there was 5 hours. So you could do, if you did a week, add all of the week together and then divide by 7 to get your daily average. Once you have found your average amount of sleep, it is time to restrict the amount of time you spend in bed each night. To do that, you need to decide the time you want to get up. So our anchor, in this case, we gave 6 a.m. and then take the sleep window away from your get up time. So for example, let's say you have to get up at 6, you usually sleep for 5 hours a night. So you go to bed, get into bed at 1 a.m. Do not go to bed any earlier, no matter how tired you feel. In order for it to work, you need to stick to the window at all times. Unfortunately, even on a Sunday. It takes discipline, but it can be helpful. I'm sure that, it does take discipline, but it's better than having crap quality sleep every night, to be quite blunt. So persevere, try it out, keep going. Finally, I've got it here, keep track of your sleep efficiency. So by keeping a sleep diary, you can see how much sleep you are getting each night. You should be aiming for 90%. As a general rule, we say that when your sleep efficiency improves, you can add 15 minutes to your sleep window. So for example, you go to bed at 12:45. If your sleep is still very poor, then try to go to bed 15 minutes later. Important tips. If you are having trouble getting to sleep like this, avoid naps for now. The minimal amount of sleep that you should be aiming for is 5 hours. I personally think it should be 6, but we have 5 here. I say 6 though. When you attempt sleep restriction, you should expect to feel tired to begin with. You should take into this account if you drive or operate machinery. And finally, some people find it easier to begin implementing sleep restriction while they are on holiday rather than being tired at work. Hello there and welcome. This is part 2 of our sleep workshop of getting good sleep habits and good quality sleep. Okay, so I'll get right into it. So, the roughly 15-minute rule. So does anybody that's listening to this find that they wake up in the middle of the night and find that they cannot get back to sleep? If so, this could be helpful to you to have in your back pocket for when that next happens. Our second behavior technique that can be used in conjunction with the sleep restriction that I talked about in the previous video is stimulus control. The idea is to strengthen your association of bedroom and the bed with sleep. One of the techniques we use in stimulus control is this roughly 15-minute rule. If you cannot sleep after 15 minutes in bed, get up and do something else until you feel tired. At this point, rather than struggling and feeling awake, you are better off taking control, getting out of bed, and doing something else until you start to feel sleepy again. Try to not worry about the fact that you are not sleeping. This will make you feel more alert. Try to remember, your bed is for sleeping. I know I keep going on about this, but it's important. If you find that you are sleeping after 30 minutes, get up. If you're not sleeping after 30 minutes, get up and do another activity somewhere that is not in your room, such as reading or listening to music. So it'd be nice calming music. Try to avoid TV as it can wake you up. So anything with lights is a bad idea. After 15 minutes, return to bed and try to sleep again. Repeat this routine as many times as necessary and use your bed only for sleeping in. The main point of stimulus control is creating the correct associations between wakefulness and sleepiness. People who have good sleep schedules tend to associate the bedroom with sleepy feelings, and non-bedroom rooms as feeling awake. That's what we tend to associate it with. If this is the other way around, it can have a bad impact on our sleep pattern. So what we need to try and do is limit the amount of time we are in our bedroom doing busy things like working or taking phone calls, being on our computers, etc. It should be possible a zen place. That's what we want. If possible, we want it to be a zen place where we relax, and vice versa. Our non-bedrooms should not be for napping. After having had sleep problems for a while, you can start to see the bedtime and your bed as an unpleasant place to be because of the amount of time that you've spent in bed not being able to sleep and feeling frustrated. This means that when you are getting ready for bed, these negative associations can cause you to feel more stressed and anxious, which means you will be less likely to sleep well. You might have started doing activities in bed other than sleeping, like reading, scrolling through social media, or watching television. Spending a lot of time in bed not sleeping causes you to associate your bed with being awake. This means you are less likely to go to sleep when you go to bed. Here are some of the ways that can help us to stop associating our bedrooms with wakefulness. Firstly, avoid napping. If you must nap, ideally before 3 p.m. and no more than 1 hour. Lie down in bed only when you feel sleepy and only use your bed for sleeping. If you are awake in bed for 15 minutes, get up, go to another room, do something else until you start to feel sleepy again, and then go back to bed. So now we're going to look on to how thoughts can affect our sleep. The aim of this section is to learn ways of reducing the mental alertness, repetitive thoughts, and worry that can interfere with sleep. So have a quick think. How long does it take you to get to sleep? Does it take 1 hour? Does it take 3 hours? Do you actually really have no idea how long it takes you to get to sleep? We ask you this because going to sleep, being asleep, and waking up involves some big changes in how your body works, like changes in brain waves. And what actually we find is that our brains are in a very different state of awareness. And this means that our judgments are not always that accurate about how long we've been asleep, and it's very common to overestimate the size of the problem. There are three big factors that make it difficult to accurately tell how much sleep you've actually had. The first one is sleep inertia. 3 to 20 minutes following waking up, we are still half asleep. We feel dazed, sleepy, out of it. It's virtually impossible to engage in any kind of mental task during this transitional period. And so it's to be expected that your estimate of how long you've been asleep might be inaccurate. We've probably all woken up with the idea that we've just drifted off for a moment to find that after actually checking the clock, quite a lot of time has passed and we're going to be late. You hit the alarm thinking you'll sleep for 2 more minutes, and then when you wake up it's been 20 minutes. I know that this has happened to me and I've had to rush off into the office in the past, but as my employers will know, this doesn't happen that often, so we're all good. Number two, we have sleep onset is characterized by an absence of memories. One of the peculiar things about that little phase when we do drop off is that it is a bit of a mystery to us. Like I said earlier in the previous video, you don't force yourself to sleep. It's something that you sort of fall into. 1 minute I was watching that film and then I wake up and the credits are rolling. When you're watching a film, it's a little easier to guess when you did fall asleep, but even then, it's often inaccurate. My team have many times told me about times they've been watching a film and fallen asleep, and then you maybe watch it the next day, and you think about the last thing you saw and go to that part, but then then they notice that they've seen the next scene and the next scene and the next 10 minutes, but they kind of lost that they'd seen that because they were dropping off and starting to fall asleep. And this is a demonstration of how memory can be slightly inaccurate about time when we fall asleep. And finally, here I have information processing and worry. As we were saying just now, worrying whilst trying to sleep is characterized by racing thoughts. It's long been established by psychological research that studies information processing. That perception of time passing is influenced, if not guided by, the units of information that occur within the system, your body or your mind. So if you just have a few thoughts over a 5 minute period, it often seems as though less time has passed. On the opposite side, if your thoughts are racing and you have loads of thoughts in that 5 minutes, it normally seems that longer than 5 minutes have passed. When we're thinking about these worries and thoughts that keep us up at night, one of the most important things for you to realize is what actually happens to your mind and body when you are worrying. When we worry, our brain sees these worries as threats. So this might be a threat to health, threat to happiness, threat to not being able to sleep. Our mind and body actually reacts as if we're in danger and prepares us for action. So we call this a flight or fight response. Please see the coping with stress videos to hear a lot more about this. But here's an example. You're lying awake in bed at 3 a.m. and you begin thinking, I wonder what he thought of me, blah blah. I bet he thought I did a rubbish job and I wish he employed someone else, blah blah. So you begin to feel worried, upset, frustrated, whatever the negative emotion might be. And we feel this in our body, which is then felt in our mind. Our brain begins the flight or fight response. And then in terms of our behavior, we start scanning for more threats. So for example, pain or discomfort we might be feeling. This then might start the cycle again by triggering thought two. I won't be able to work tomorrow. I'm going to do so badly in that call. Can you start to see how this sort of, hopefully you're starting to see how this works, this spiral, as it were. Rather than trying to stop the thoughts, it's normally better to manage them by noticing that those thoughts are unhelpful. It can be powerful to realize what you're doing when you're having these thoughts because this can make you feel more in control. So realize that you've zoomed in on a particular emotion that you don't need to feel right now. And realize these things your body and mind think are threats actually aren't. They're false alarms. You're not being chased by a tiger or about to go to a life-changing interview. You're just having a bit of a stressful time of it right now. And you move yourself away from that situation and you accept the thoughts are there, that can be very powerful and can allow you to relax substantially. One of the ways that we can challenge the negative thought patterns that you're having is by asking yourself these questions. What is the evidence? Oh, before I read this, I'd like to just say, have a think about some of the thoughts that enter into your head when you're trying to get to sleep. Okay. So it might be, I can't go into work tomorrow because I'm going to mess up, or it could be something like, I'm not going to get any sleep tonight. I'm going to be really tired tomorrow. It could be really negative. It could be things like I'm useless, etc., etc. So we're going to go through some of these questions though. What is the evidence that supports this idea? What is the evidence against this idea? Is there an alternative explanation? What is the worst that could happen? Could I live through it? What is the best that could happen? What is the most realistic outcome? What would I tell my best friend if he or she were in the same situation? How might someone else interpret the same situation differently? And what you're doing with these questions is you're basically reasoning through the thoughts you might have and thinking about how to reframe the negative ones so that they are not quite so negative. So going back to the thought, I won't be able to function tomorrow, what would be a way of challenging this thought or reframing it as more helpful? So we've got the table here. You might have already thought of one, but so by finding the alternative thought is, I did not sleep so well one night last week, but I could still function. I may not be sleeping, but at least I am resting. And the feeling of anxiety in the table you can see goes down as opposed to I won't be able to function tomorrow. It's a very definitive sort of thinking. There's no sort of grey, there's no moving around in that thought pattern, whereas the other one is there's some bit more reasoning in it. It's still got that negative connotation, like I'm going to be tired, but at least I'm getting my rest in, I'm going to be okay, I'm going to make it. And just by doing this, the worry and anxious feelings can be reduced and the cycle itself gets broken and it's weakened, and so sleep will come more easily. And this is something that if you kept practicing this, then it gets better and better and better. When worries and nagging thoughts are whizzing through your mind, remember that this is normal. We all experience challenging thoughts after all. However, it is when we hold on to these worries and start going over things over and over and over again that it becomes difficult to sleep. Something that can be quite helpful is being mindful of our thoughts. This means simply acknowledging them without judgment and without getting caught up in them. Some people find it helpful to think of their thoughts as passing clouds or as cars on a motorway where you stand on a bridge and just watch them go by. Simply watch your thoughts and label them. For example, this is a thought, and watch it as it floats away. This has been shown in studies to reduce anxiety by up to 50%. If you are finding it difficult to let your thoughts go, then you could try a technique called paradoxical thinking. Instead of avoiding the things racing through our minds, we embrace them. So rather than framing our wakefulness as a bad thing, we may lie comfortably in our bed, and when we get up after 15 minutes, we see it as an opportunity to do something we enjoy. So yes, when you lie in bed, you would not try to fall asleep. And when you feel your eyelids getting heavy, tell yourself, just another minute. This may sound very counterintuitive, but it is a bit like reverse psychology. By allowing ourselves to be awake, we take the pressure off and we usually find that sleep comes naturally anyway. We all know that sleep is one thing where the more we try and control it, the more difficult it becomes. The final technique I mentioned here is that when there are many things on your mind, it can be very helpful to lay the day to rest by writing them down. This way you can decide to come back to them another time and remind yourself that none of these things have to be solved tonight. And this was something I was saying earlier, write your thoughts down in a journal and dump the journal in another room. The last part of this session is we're going to look into the last session that we're moving on to is how feelings can impact your sleep. Now, on to the last part of the session where we'll be talking about techniques to make us feel relaxed and help us fall asleep. We want to develop a good bedtime wind down routine and learn relaxation techniques that lead to sleep. So, before we go to bed, it can be helpful to have a routine to switch off our minds and relax our bodies. You might remember me talking about this earlier. We call this a wind down routine. So have a little think. Do you have any wind down to routine that you use right now? I mean, when we were children, we were told how important it was to have a good bedtime routine. Often we place less value on the importance of this routine as we get older, but it is still very important. Our bodies still have this eternal internal clock, a circadian rhythm, which relies on routine to help us know what time of the day it is. For example, on top of what I've been saying about getting sunlight in the morning and reducing light in the evenings, regular meal times and regular bedtimes are also important factors to help us sleep better. Setting up an achievable and consistent routine of healthy sleep habits before bed allows your body and mind to prepare for sleep and to produce lots of the sleep-inducing hormone melatonin. This routine should include doing relaxation activities that help you, relaxing activities even, that help you wind down and prepare your bedroom for sleep. So you start this routine about 60 minutes to 90 minutes, so hour and a half before you go to sleep. Finish your work. Hopefully you would have finished well before this, but finish all your kind of busy activities before this period. Then it is time for relaxation. So this will be specific to you. We don't all want baths and candles. We might want to switch off with an easy TV program or book. Some people like to do meditation. We don't want this wind down to cause anxiety, so try to be relaxed. If you're a bit late doing it, don't beat yourself up. Having a regular bedtime routine teaches your body when it is time to go to sleep. Have a soothing drink like a chamomile tea or a hot milky drink. Have a bath or a routine like washing your face and brushing your teeth. Go to the bed at the same time every night. When in bed, try to think of nice things. For example, think of 5 nice things that happened today. They might be big or small, such as a nice conversation, seeing the sunshine, hearing nice music on the radio. You could also do a gratitude diary to help you put this into words. You could do a relaxed breathing exercise, so one hand on the stomach, the other on the chest. Deliberately slow your breathing down. Breathe in deeply in your stomach instead of high in your chest, which is why you put your hand on your tummy. And try to wake up at the same time every day, even if this is tiring to begin with. Just a couple more just to sort of say, writing down any lingering thoughts and ideas into a journal to take them off your mind, listen to relaxing music, reading a book, having a relaxing bath, or try a relaxation exercise. The goal of the wind down and these relaxation exercises are available on our YouTube channel in separate videos. The goal of the wind down period is to transition from your normal alert state of mind to one that's much more relaxed. As we spoke about, it is also helpful to limit any blue light and turn off your phone when you do not need to use it. Dim the light and turn on the night sound. Make your bedroom a pleasant place to be. Get a little nightlight. Keep your bedroom clean and tidy. Introduce pleasant smells such as lavender and maybe put even lavender oil on your pillow. Get extra pillows to make it extra cozy and make sure that everything in the home is safe so the doors are locked and the windows are closed. So hopefully everyone finds it much easier to go to sleep when their body is relaxed. Putting yourself into a state of relaxation can be really helpful for falling asleep. There are many different techniques. One of them is visualization. When practicing visualization, you picture yourself in a place you find comforting or relaxing. So for example, a beach. So I'm going to run through this very quickly, but we also have versions of this available throughout our page. So I want you to shut your eyes and imagine a place in lots of detail, and you're going to be trying to use all your senses. So shut your eyes and go to a place that is extra relaxing for you. Okay. So in your extra relaxing place, what can you see? Maybe you can see the wind softly shaking the leaves of the palm tree and the sun setting over the ocean. What can you hear? Maybe you can hear waves gently rolling over the beach. What can you feel? Maybe you could feel warm sunshine on your face. And if you are on a beach, maybe the sand beneath your feet or the grass between your toes. What can you smell? Can you smell the fresh air and the scent of the ocean, of the trees, of wherever it is that you are? Okay, open your eyes. With this technique, it is important to practice it beforehand so that when you find yourself lying awake, you don't need to think on the spot and you already have this technique ready to use. Another technique is called progressive muscle relaxation. When using this technique, you slowly go through the different parts of your body. So let's say you feet, calves, thighs, etc. You go through the different parts of your body, you tense them for a few seconds, and then you let them completely relax while saying the word relax in your mind. You can start with your feet and work your way upwards. So feet, calves, thighs, so legs, abs, upper body, chest, arms, fingers, face, scalp, etc. And finally, sleep meditation is also really useful. So we have examples of this available. If you want to be able to drift off naturally and effortlessly, learning how to relax before you go to sleep is absolutely essential. People who go to bed without feeling relaxed take much longer to fall asleep. This will be different for everyone, but meditation has been proven to reduce the stress response. It shifts our response to our thoughts and feelings and boosts the sleep promoting hormone melatonin. We would, if this was a group workshop, I would now go through a sleep meditation with you. But because different meditations work for different people, what we're going to have instead is this is all going to be available on our YouTube page as a separate video. So have a look through the different ones that are available and see which one works for you. So some takeaway tips from this talk. Keep your sleep goals specific. For example, do relaxation exercise 3 times a week after work and cut out unhelpful sleep habits, so drinking alcohol close to bedtime. You also want to be aware of possible obstacles you might find and come up with potential solutions to them. So, for example, exhausted after a terrible night's sleep, can't bear to get up at the anchor time. Possible solution, force yourself up and go out and enjoy a morning stroll. Maybe say to yourself, I'm going to have 20 minutes, half an hour nap at 12 o'clock. Another example, can't find anywhere other than the bedroom to do some paperwork. Possible solution, plan ahead, identify other places for sleep, incompatible behaviors. This could be your local library, for example. Some useful apps and resources that were mentioned. So for more intensive support, Sleepio is a free self-guided program based on cognitive behavioral therapy principles. It addresses insomnia through different techniques, and one of them is sleep restriction. The great thing is that Sleepio calculates sleep efficiency for you. Sleepio only takes a couple of weeks, and it is only a session per week, and then you can implement the techniques over the course of that week. Sleepio is actually prescribed by GPs in the NHS now. It's that popular. There's a whole bunch of other apps on there as well that are really useful. I'd say things like TED is going to be useful when you're going to look up, say, a Matthew Walker, and you can get a version of what I've been talking about from a professor. But then there's also things like Calm and Headspace, which are really, really good if you're trying to get that meditation angle. And I would really implore you to try meditation before sleep, because it's shown not just to help people get good quality sleep and get to sleep faster, that it's shown to lead to more activity in the parts of your brain that you want activity in when you're asleep. You get these things called spindles, and if you meditate, you get more spindles in your sleep, which means the quality is a direct sort of link in that quality of your sleep is getting better. So I highly recommend meditation, but I would also highly recommend Sleepio. So we talk about this in all of our talks. If you have a heavy backpack and you are struggling, it can be so helpful to unpack your backpack. And when I say that, I mean talk about it. Sometimes you might want to bottle it all in and not burden people, but the thing is that a lot of people will be feeling exactly the same as you. And trust me, nobody wants you to suffer in silence. They would much rather you talk to them. It can also really help that someone else has experienced something similar. You have no idea if someone else has been through the same stuff as you until you tell them about it. And maybe what worked for them will work for you. It is very possible. You can reach out to family and friends, but also do not forget that we are here at Sutton Uplift. And if you do not live in Sutton, then you can type in IAPT, which stands for Improving Access to Psychological Treatments or Therapies, in Google. So letter I, letter A, letter P, letter T on Google. And so IAPT near me is what I would type. And you will more than likely find something and a service in your area that will be useful. If you think you might need one-to-one support, we at Sutton Uplift are also able to offer that to you as well. But like I said, IAPT near me is what you're going to need, is what I would do, to be perfectly honest. And finally, if you are from Sutton and you have used our service, then this is the service user forum. This is your chance to give feedback to us, to tell us how we've been doing. You get £10 for just 1 hour of your time. You don't have to stay for the whole hour. You can also come as many times as you like. If you'd like to be part of this, just scan the code on the QR code that you can see on your screen now, and you should be basically it should load up an email that you can send and say, I want to do this kind of thing. Also, this is on the first Tuesday of every month from 3 to 4 p.m. And basically, you show up, and a member of my team is there, or two members of my team is there, and you can give feedback as to how we're doing. And maybe you could tell us about things you'd like to see. Maybe you like these videos, maybe you don't. Let us know. I would normally ask the room, what would you take home from today's workshop, and sort of pester people to give me an answer to all of these things. I think that I personally, from doing this little bit of the workshop, I think that something that I might do is I might start journaling a little bit more before bed. I think it's a habit, especially in terms of the nice things, writing down a few nice things. So quite often when I do journal stuff, I'll just write about the stuff that's sort of troubling me and worrying me. But I realized after doing this that actually having a more positive mindset is probably going to help me getting into bed. So that is something that I will take. I'll start adding some gratitude stuff as well when I do these journals in the evening. But that's the end of the workshop. Thank you for your time. I hope that you've gained something from this. I'm Leo Bell from Sutton Uplift. It's been a pleasure. Look out for our other talks and on YouTube and our clips. And yes, I hope that this has been helpful. And I will see you in the next video.